Welcome to Pick of the Pods, the podcast. This is the audio companion to the Pick of the Pods newsletter, which delivers you a weekly recommendation of the one podcast you should be listening to right now. I listen to hundreds of podcasts and only the best make it onto Pick of the Pods. Find dozens of picks on my newsletter on Substack. This podcast goes deeper. I'm talking directly to the people who make some of those great podcasts to find out how they do what they do and hear about what they're listening to. My guest on this episode is a producer of one of the biggest podcasts in politics on both sides of the Atlantic. The Rest is Politics, and The Rest is Politics US. Welcome to Pick of the Pods, Fiona Douglas.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great to see you again, Fiona. So tell us, for anyone who's not heard of The Rest is Politics, what is it?
So The Rest is Politics is hosted by Alastair Campbell and Rory Stewart, and I now mainly produce The Rest is Politics US, hosted by Katty Kay and Anthony Scaramucci. Bi-weekly podcast talking all things US politics. We aim to cover a few different topics every week, let listeners know what's going on. I think one of the great things about Katty and Anthony is it's also like their relationship's great. They have really great banter. We aim to kind of give the insider-outsider take. Katty's British, but has been in the US doing US politics for about 30 years. And Anthony is American and has worked in Trump's White House for 11 whole days. So he's got the real inside scoop on what it's like in the Trump administration. Yeah,
I like that framing of it, insider outsider, because Scaramucci is an insider and an outsider, isn't he? And he revels in it on the show. He was an insider with Trump. We're going to hear a clip later on. So on these shows, I'm asking people to bring 2 or 3 clips that we can listen to and watch to discuss. We'll hear him reveling in his both insider and outsider status. Should we take a look at a first clip, Fiona, that you've sent me? This is a good one because it's both, and I'm assuming this is why you picked this one, it's both the UK version and the US version. Tell us something about this clip, which was on the US general election night.
Yeah, so this is a clip where we did a collab of both the podcasts, also joined by Dominic Sandbrook from The Rest is History and Marina Hyde from The Rest is Entertainment. And we took everyone out to New York and we did an 8-hour, I think it was, live stream on the night of the US election on November 5th in 2024. This was a kind of first experience for us. We took them from their offices at home behind a microphone and put them on a panel in a studio, full production, completely live. The clip you're about to hear is later in the night once we'd realised that Donald Trump had won the election, after I think almost all of them had predicted that Kamala Harris was going to win. This is the point in the night where I think we're multiple coffees in at this stage and everyone's maybe thinking we need to switch to something stronger because it was getting a bit depressing maybe.
Okay, well let's take a look and a listen.
The Rest is Politics US election live stream. I'm Alastair Campbell with Rory Stewart.
And I'm Rory Stewart, yeah.
Oh, stop it. Anthony Scaramucci, Marina Hyde and Dominic Sandbrook. Digesting the fact, it is now a fact, not speculation, not prediction, nothing. It is a fact that Donald Trump has been elected President of America for the second time, just the second person in history to come back for a second term in the way that he's done after losing. Rory, where are we?
So very quick explainer. The evening has actually gone much more quickly, for those of you that are just tuning in, than people expected. Many people thought because of 2020, more mail votes coming in, that this could drag on for days. It didn't. A bit like 2016, we're in a situation in which basically the race was over by about 2:30 in the morning, our time, about half an hour ago. And it really finished at the point at which it became clear that Donald Trump had taken Pennsylvania. There was nearly an hour and a half of hanging around as the votes got towards 95, 96, 97% of the votes with him leading. And the reason why on this graph it's showing 267, and he needs 270 to win, but we're saying he's won, is that it's almost inconceivable that they would not take Alaska. In fact, he's likely to take many more of the swing states. He could end up in a position stronger than he was against Hillary Clinton in 2016. I'm presenting this all in a slightly cheery voice. I am profoundly shattered by the whole situation. And what we've been talking about over the last few hours is that this will have incredible impacts on Russia-Ukraine, where we're likely to see support taken away from Zelensky and Putin increase his position in Europe. We're likely to see huge consequences for American democracy, for the Supreme Court. Trump is a man who is threatening mass deportations, revenge against his enemies. It's been a profoundly unpleasant campaign. And the Democrats, who I felt had learned a lot of lessons from 2016, had turned a lot of things around, sadly, on the night, did not do enough to win.
How are you going to handle this?
I'm going to be a good sport. I congratulated him and Elon Musk on Twitter. I'm an American. I want the guy to succeed. If he's going in a direction that I think doesn't make sense for the country, I think I owe myself and my family to speak.
This isn't a broadcast, it's a podcast, but it looks very much like a TV show that you would have been watching on CNN or Fox News or BBC, but it's actually a podcast. Quite a different feel, I suppose, a live event like this. I mean, where were you, Fiona, when this was being recorded?
Yeah, so I was in the studio we were recording in. My main role that evening was interacting with the audience. So we had audience members writing in questions, voting in polls, and we worked with Display, a kind of vision mixing team that helped like ping that up all on the screen and make it look like hopefully a very professional production. So it was live streamed on YouTube, and then we took the podcast and put it out hopefully before anyone in the UK woke up that morning, which I think was really helpful as well. We're on American time and able to have that for people when they woke up and got the results. So
you did an 8-hour live show though, so you must have had to then cut that down to something more digestible, right?
Yeah, I think what we did, so we did 4 hours live, and then we took an hour-long break from the live stream as well, when it was a point in the evening where results were hadn't started to come in yet. So it was a little bit of a lull. And in that period, we were able to record with Katty and Anthony a really quick reaction and gather our thoughts a bit and put out some of that first section of the show. And then after the second 4 hours, we were able to put out some of that as well.
So you had kind of guests from the stable of podcasts, which is called Goalhanger, the company. Most of them are called The Rest Is Something. A lot of people have asked me, you know that The Rest Is, why is it called The Rest Is? And I've always assumed, and you can probably confirm or deny this, it must have started with The Rest Is History, because that is a phrase, right? And the rest, we did this, we did that, and the rest is history, which makes sense. The rest is all those other things, entertainment, politics. It doesn't necessarily make any sense, but it's a good kind of branding, right? Is that where it came from?
So it started with The Rest Is History with Tom and Dominic. That wasn't actually our first history podcast that we did. We Have Ways of Making You Talk with James Holland, Tom Holland's brother, and Al Murray. So that came first. So I guess there's another world where we could have had a We Have Ways of
Making
series,
You Vote.
But yeah. Exactly. But yeah, Rest Is History came next. I think there was a lot of discussion between Tom, Dominic, and then Jack Davenport, Tony Pastor, our two founders, about what that podcast was going to be called. And I don't know if they were thinking at that point that this is the beginning of an empire and we're going to have to double down on this name. But it was Rest Is History first, and then Rest Is Politics came afterwards, that I think worked well. And we have some that work really well. I think Rest Is Classified is quite a clever way.
That's the spying one, right?
Yeah.
And the rest is Entertainment, which I absolutely love, with Marina Hyde, who was on that clip. And who's the co-presenter? It's Richard Osman. Yeah,
they're a brilliant team, I think.
Let's talk a bit about chemistry then, because what you've got then on The Rest Is Politics UK. Alastair Campbell, for anyone who doesn't know, he was the spin doctor of Tony Blair, the Prime Minister back then. Very well-known kind of pundit since then on British TV. And now, I guess this is his main gig now, is The Rest Is Politics, I would guess. Rory Stewart, a former British Member of Parliament. I believe he was a minister in Conservative governments. They're both, so in theory, from opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're not. They're both kind of centrist-ish. One, Alastair Campbell from the left, the Labour Party, Rory Stewart from the right, the Conservative Party, but much closer probably than the differences in either of those parties. But what they do have, and I know what people love about that, is a chemistry, and you also have the great chemistry, as you've mentioned, between Katty Kay and Anthony Scaramucci. How do you as a producer go about, what can you do to encourage that?
With Rory and Alastair, I mean, the way Restless Politics began is Alastair Campbell, I think, was asked, are there any Tories you could bear to sit down with for an hour? And he brought up Rory's name, so he was chosen together from the start, and our whole shtick with them was disagreeing agreeably. Can we take what's becoming quite vitriolic online and horrible discussions, or even news interviews where it's just people really going at each other and you feel like you don't get anywhere in a conversation, it's just kind of screaming into a void, and take that and flip it on its head and have two people that disagree entirely but are able to have a sensible, relaxed conversation with each other, where they can disagree but go like, hey, we're both coming at this with our own opinions, with our own research, we're both sensible people, we're not trying to catch each other out or kind of upset each other. So I think that's where they then could bring in quite a good audience of people from all different kind of spectrums. We definitely have the centrist dad trope, but we have a lot of young listeners, a lot of women, a lot of different political views. And I think with Rory and Alastair, like, they do get on really well. It's quite funny. People are always fascinated by their relationship and like, are they really friends? And I think that is the amazing thing. They do get on really well. And I think they both enjoy the debate with each other. It's nice. They can have a good back and forth and get into the real depths of discussion and into the kind of meatiness of it without upsetting each other. And I think that's super important. And as a producer, we really we try and identify beforehand the kind of sticking points, the things they might argue on. And sometimes it's a bit of like, oh guys, like, I know you both agree on this topic, but like, let's get a bit of discussion going. Is there something that we want to have a more of a back and forth about? Katty and Anthony, they had actually not met each other before they started the podcast. They met on the podcast and are such different types of people, I think, as well. You know, Anthony's this Italian American from Long Island, Katty's a kind of adopted American, and they get on incredibly well. They have a real friendship now. It's so nice. Like, I think you can tell from listening to it that they enjoy each other's company. And these are the kind of, the feeling I think of the Restless podcasts is it's a kind of conversation you might have with your friends in the pub over politics brought to a podcast.
In the pub, yeah, interesting. Not too drunk though, hopefully. Okay, well, let's hear a clip then from Katty and Anthony then. And this is the start of a show with a bit of an opening montage you've got with some news headlines.
Wherever President Trump is, Elon Musk is likely nearby.
Can the richest man in the world and the most powerful man on the planet work together?
Of course he's going to fall out with Donald Trump.
I think probably Elon will last no longer than 6 months.
It's now official. Elon Musk is leaving his role.
Elon Musk calling for Donald Trump's impeachment.
Shares of Tesla down over 14%.
In the words of Neil Sedaka, breaking up is hard to do, I guess.
So today, we dig into what Musk actually did with all of that power. What did he really achieve? What was destroyed? And after 130 days, that, by the way, is 11.8 Scaramucci's.
Let's give him 12, Katty. Let's give him 12. We got to round
Should
up.
we
have
round
to
it
be
up?
generous.
Okay.
Yes, we have to be generous with Scaramucci's, okay? Like Liz Truss, we had to say 4.1 because we didn't want to round down to 4, right? So
No.
We're at 12 for,
So he had 12 Scaramucci's in the White House. And I think the big question for this episode, the big question for Elon Musk, is how much has he changed the United States of America? Will the country ever look quite the same again? So that's what we're going to try and answer in this episode.
So that's Katty Kay and Anthony Scaramucci. I guess this is something they come back to again and again. You can count how long or short someone has stayed in office by the number of Scaramucci's they've been in. The first time I'd ever heard of Anthony Scaramucci was when he joined Trump 1.0, was in the cabinet, and then suddenly he was kicked out unceremoniously. He's comparing it there to Liz Truss, the short-lived British Prime Minister. Yeah, interesting you say they'd never met before, Fiona. And quite different voices. Yeah, Anthony Scaramucci, he's got a great voice for podcasts because he sounds like, he's got that kind of tough New York style. And then you've got Katty, who has quite what you might call quite a posh English voice, but it does have, you can tell she's been in the States for a while. There's a bit of a mid-Atlantic thing going on there as well. So lucky they seem to get each other and respect each other as well. I think that's probably an important thing about both those podcasts, right? Mutual respect.
100%. Yeah, I think having a good relationship between them too. I don't think we could do it without that. And it's nice as well, like their input into the podcasts. This was something that we did as a members only series. It was a 5-part series all about Elon Musk that we released last year when Trump was in his first 100 days and Elon Musk was kind of tearing government structures apart with his Doge department. And this was a series that I wrote with our other producer, India. And the amazing thing was Katty and Anthony, like their input into this series as well. They both did tons of research for it, got involved in the scripts, in the kind of running orders, and both chatting to each other beforehand about Anthony going, well, when I met the guy, like this is what we want to talk about. This is where we're going to be able to put it in the episode. And having the two of them, we're kind of constantly talking on WhatsApp about what we're going to talk about that week in the podcast, and each of them saying, well, I've spoken to this person and I've got this kind of insight that I want to bring in. And Anthony's saying that, I'm at this summit this week and I've met these people. So I think having that kind of constant relationship with them and then with each other where we can really bounce ideas back and forth is super important.
It's interesting. You said you wrote or you co-wrote the episodes. It's interesting to hear when you hear the credits to a podcast. This episode was written by, a lot of people think a podcast, particularly one that is largely a conversation like the one you and I are doing now, you just plonk a microphone down in front of someone and say, right, say something interesting. And actually a lot of podcasts probably are done like that.
Yeah, I think ours really depend between the kind of series that we're doing. So on a weekly basis, it almost is a bit of, I don't want to say just plonking the microphone down. It's a big discussion beforehand, and we always have 1 or 2 pages of just, here are the key points that you need to just remember to hit today, because when it's Trump, as we had yesterday when we were recording, I think he changed his mind the hour before we were about to record. So there's just the key facts you want to put down, and then we really leave Katty and Anthony just to chat to themselves. And then with a series like Elon Musk, it's across 5 episodes. There's a lot more of, we want to make sure that we get the narrative arc of the story. There's bits that we want to tease at the beginning, but don't tell that story yet. We're going to keep it for episode 2. And that's where there's a lot more of, I say script, it's not a script that they necessarily read out off a page, but something to follow and make sure we're hitting A, B, C in order. And yeah, I think that's the nice thing about the kind of podcast. We have ones like the Elon Musk series that are really produced, really edited, really making sure that the story makes sense. And then on another day, we'll do a live stream where we decide a couple hours before and we have to just go for it with no script, no research, and it's just Katty and Anthony in their element, I think, talking to the news as they've just seen it.
And news moves so quickly. It always has done, but I think in the years I've been a journalist, I predate the internet, actually, and I certainly predate social media. News suddenly changes. If you're covering US politics or global politics, you've got the Trump White House, which is very unpredictable. You could probably, between the start and ending of a recording of an episode, I can imagine a Truth Social post coming out, which changes the direction. I mean,
completely.
have you come across that?
We've had that situation, I think, where we're on Riverside, we record, and we are messaging them constantly throughout, kind of just checking in. A lot of it's just timings or letting it flow, but then there's quite often, oh my God, Trump's just done a Truth Social, and, well, we're recording this podcast right now. Trump just announced yesterday that his 48-hour deadline for Iran, it's not a 48-hour deadline anymore, it's now a 5-day deadline. And that was just that, an hour before we were recording, we have to change that. And we also had, I think, on election night, we did record, not live, but a podcast that to go out the next morning. And it was edging towards Trump winning, but it wasn't confirmed. And then during the recording, we had confirmation that Trump was definitely going to win. And I texted them, just didn't want to break the flow, but just texted Katty during the recording, and she just kind of openly goes, "Oh my God, I've just seen my phone. This is it. And this is the news." And I think that kind of organic way of reacting to it works really well. That's something that just is authentic to how the news is at the moment. It's so fast moving.
So how did you get into this then, Fiona? Here's a job that wouldn't have existed when I was your age, interested in whatever I was interested in at the time, which was journalism. But I couldn't have thought, I'll become a podcast producer, because that's a job that's probably only existed for the last 10 or 15 years or so. What's your story? How did you come to this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something, even when I was kind of in school thinking about what exams to take and what to do, it wasn't podcast producer, definitely wasn't on the kind of list of jobs I was thinking of. But I went to university and studied linguistics and English language, just because that was something I was really interested in, but wanted to keep my options open. And then studied broadcast journalism as a master's at City in London, which I'd really recommend if anyone's listening and interested in getting into the industry. I thought it was such an amazing master's. I think, Robin, have you lectured there?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I taught very briefly, but I did teach on the, I think it was the International Journalism Master's course, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant course. So it's basically, you do radio, TV, and I did a module in podcasting. And that's where I learned to edit audio, to use cameras, to record. And from there, while I was at the uni and before that, I had been a big fan of The Rest is Politics with Alastair Campbell and Rory Stewart. Katty and Anthony's podcast didn't exist yet. And I reached out to the senior producer and asked to get involved. And I think, luckily, a few months later, they were hiring a new round of trainee assistant producers, and I applied for the job and thankfully got it, and then started working with Rory and Alastair. So that was in 2022. I'm trying to think what would have been happening now. It was the height of the kind of Tory drama machine that was going on at the time.
We must have been coming out of lockdown. Kind of COVID was in the rearview mirror at that point.
Yeah, it was a lot of Partygate discussions, wasn't it?
Partygate, Boris Johnson. Eventually, his government fell because of concerns about people having parties in Number 10. So it was an interesting time. Always an interesting time in politics. But to see a government
like whenever
fall,
it's happening, there's always something going on at this point. And then, yes, the Rest is Politics. I also worked on The Rest is Money with Steph McGovern and Robert Peston. That was launched in the first few months of me being at Goalhanger. That was really interesting. So they do a kind of economic take on the news and also interview a lot of business leaders and people like that. And then in April 2024, when the Rest is Politics US was launched, I began to work on that. And then gradually since then, I've kind of done that full time and just do the odd thing with Rory and Alastair.
What, if anyone's listening to this and they're thinking of getting into podcasting, I mean, what were the skills? Why did they hire you? Is it technical skills? Is it the enthusiasm? Oh, I love your show and I want to be on it. Is it a new sense? What are the skills that got you hired?
I think if you're younger, if you're straight out of university and trying to get into it, I think it's one of those things where the skills can be taught. And I had done some editing before, but actually I came and Goalhanger did it differently, and that's something that I had to learn and anyone had had to learn. So it's helpful, but I think that's the thing that you can learn. I think the thing that they really look for is, like you say, enthusiasm. And we always say that maybe 80% of the job is talent management and being able to talk to people, to give guidance to hosts in the right way, to organise things. And I think all of those skills you can learn, but they're also something that you want to come with the right attitude, show that you're willing to work, show that you're enthusiastic, obviously have an interest in, whether it's a podcast or a TV show, whatever, show that you have an interest in that show and that you understand why people listen, that you understand what makes it a good show, not just that you sit passively and enjoy it, but why do people come? And then that, I think, shows that you can help make it a better show and be a really good input to the team.
I'm betting as part of that, an important skill is knowing what a story is. So you can, let's talk about this thing not a story. But what's great about, certainly you're blessed in having those 4 hosts that we've mentioned. They've done it a million times. They will focus in on something. But you as a producer must have a sense of, here's how we approach this issue. Here's the story.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big part of the job as well, is we know what we want to talk about a lot of the time, but it's what goes first, what goes in the title, how do we frame this? A lot of the time it's going, I think people really respond to when you frame stories around people, and it's not just around maybe, I don't know, an abstract way that Trump's made his money. It's about the relationships he has, and this kind of thing really resonates. And I think that's a really amazing thing as well about Rory and Alastair in particular. They don't necessarily follow what else, like the headlines that the BBC are following. They each come with a really interesting thing that they've heard of that they want to talk about that week, and they almost decide the news agenda for themselves. And it's, how do we get that story that people might not be following and make sure that it's told in a way, and this is where Rory is amazing of his explainers, of course, and making sure that everyone understands the significance of the story that's being told. And with Katty and Anthony, we're speaking to a really international audience, so it's a lot of making sure that you know who this character is, you know why a lot of the time, why is this guy whispering in Trump's ear, and why do you need to know his name, and you know, this is the person you should keep a lookout for when you're reading the news later this week.
It's often hard to know who your audience is, isn't it? You're going out around the world. I think probably any journalist of any kind has this issue of, how much do I need to explain? How much knowledge can I assume? And you have to assume some, or it sounds like you're treating people like idiots.
Yeah. It's definitely an art, isn't it? To kind of, you want to explain it. I think this is where we go, how would I tell my friends who have an interest in politics, but they might not have read the news that day. They might only kind of listen to Rory and Alastair once a week, and that's where they get their news. So it's a fine balance of doing a little explanation, but not, as you say, you don't want to patronize people, and people, if they're listening to this podcast, frankly, they're interested in the news. They know what's going on in the world.
Right. But they might not be in the Beltway, as they say in Washington, and know exactly who that particular Trump whisperer is you're talking about. Let's have a listen to your third clip then. This one is a readout on Kamala Harris. So we're going back in time. Imagine a time when no one knew Trump would win that election. Kamala Harris had stepped in fairly last minute to replace President Biden, whose health was just, they couldn't hide it anymore. He didn't look like physically fit to be running for a second term. And this, I believe, is Katty's readout from a speech that Kamala Harris gave, almost presenting herself now as the candidate. Is that what we're about to hear?
Yeah, so this is after we'd been at the Democratic National Convention that was in Chicago, and we'd been in the arena watching the speech that Kamala Harris had done, and then rushed home to do a live stream with Anthony, who wasn't there. And this is Katty kind of giving her take on, as you say, this was at the height of hope for the Democrats, I would say. So it's such a different time to now, but I think it speaks to kind of how podcasts can be taken from looking at news from afar to being in the room and then feeding that back to everyone at home within an hour of the speech and live as well. So the idea would be people could watch the speech and immediately flick over to get Katty and Anthony's take on it.
Let's hear it.
I have just rushed back from the Democratic National Convention. I don't think I have seen a politician come this far, this fast, and perform this well in that big a setting with the stakes that high. I can't remember one who's done it on this quick a turnaround. And this was the most important speech of her political career, the most important moment of her political career, her chance to introduce herself to the American people. And she handled it like a pro.
Play Republican strategist for a second. And you've now come out of there, you've watched the speech, and now you're going to hit that speech and you're going to attack that speech. How would you attack that speech?
You're going to go after her for what she kept saying several times over on banks and what she did. There was a kind of slightly anti-corporate note to the speech. It was a very... it was a progressive Democratic speech in standing up for the little guy. There was not much outreach to Trump voters?
So, like we said, it's a podcast, it's not a radio or a TV show. What's the difference, do you think?
I think the thing with a podcast, it's not limited in any way. There's no 15-minute segment you have to fill. If a topic deserves to be spoken about for half an hour, that's what we're going to give it. If actually there's not much to say, we want to move on to something more interesting, we can do that. I think it's the flexibility. We can be live when we want to be live, when there's a news story that we think everyone needs to hear straight away. And also being live lets us interact with listeners. They can comment and we can answer their questions in the moment. But when we want to spend a lot of time and make a long series, we can do that as well. So I think flexibility is a huge part of it. And of course, our hosts give their opinions. I think that's what makes it so important. We're not going to sit here and say that, you know, Trump's tariff decision was a sensible decision on one hand, and on the other hand, it wasn't. It's no holds barred. It's, you know, they're able to really speak out. And I think people really value that. People want to hear a sensible opinion.
The risk, of course, with podcasts having that kind of political slant, I mean, you could hear it in that first clip. I don't think anyone in the room was overjoyed that Donald Trump was about to get his second term. It's quite clear that, you know, if I would suggest the rest of his politics would be, the presenters of that show would have been happier had the result gone the other way. I don't think they're really hiding that. The good side of that is they can honestly express their opinions. They don't have to tiptoe around, oh, this is a good idea, you know, hasn't the president done a marvellous job here? That maybe the risk is, I'd be interested in hearing your opinion, that everyone's in their bubble. So you've got the centrist dads, expression you use, Fiona, not me, listening to the rest is politics. It's confirming their own biases. They're feeling good about their own opinions. If you're a MAGA supporter, you'll be listening to, I don't know what, you know, from Joe Rogan down, getting a similar sense of your worth is being...
It's true to an extent, isn't it, with any media where you choose, we're in a world where you can now completely choose what you consume. You're not limited to 4 channels on the TV where we're all getting the same thing. But I think the thing I'm always surprised out of our audience is you do a lot of the time get people that are very clearly Trump supporters or MAGA supporters messaging in, which I'm always so interested that, oh, you are listening to this podcast as well. We're able to speak to quite a wide audience. And obviously with Rory and Alastair, that's the amazing thing. You have Rory on the right and Alastair on the left talking about a kind of breadth of subjects and not agreeing all the time. And then with Anthony as well, I guess the thing is he is a Republican. He doesn't agree with the current Republican administration, but I think had Kamala Harris won, we'd be having a lot of different arguments right now where although he wanted her to win, he's very open about that, donated to her campaign, he's not a Democrat. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic you have as well. And Katty's take on it, she's on the ground in Washington. She's not able to vote in the US, so she's got a completely kind of sideways take on things where she talks to all different kinds of people. She's been around the country where she spoke to a lot of MAGA supporters and is I think one of the things she does quite well is people voted for Trump. People did want him in. There's a huge swathe of people who think he's doing a really amazing job and he speaks to them, and that the Democrats make them feel quite isolated. And I think that's always we quite often have this question when we do our Q&As of like, can you tell us something Trump's doing really well? And it's always quite an interesting discussion because it's very easy to kind of be looking at him as a madman and as this figure that just makes crazy decisions. So I think that's always quite interesting to look at the other side and just look at everything from not just 2 angles of Katty's take and Anthony's take, but from all angles of people they've spoken to as well.
I think you've absolutely put your finger on it there. And I think if the listener wants, you know, kind of a genuinely nourishing diet, they do want to hear different views. I mean, my own listening, well, I deliberately put myself out and try to listen to things that I know will enrich me. Yeah. I can't do it too much. But I think if you can bring an element of that, yeah, exactly. Why did people vote this way? What is going to understand? We should all be trying to understand people who don't think like us. And I think you're succeeding on the moment, when you get that right. I think that's very valuable. Let's talk about parasocial relationships. This is a word I hear thrown around a lot.
I think it's definitely a big part of podcasts, and maybe that's where it's different to radio. I don't know. It's very intimate. You have them in your, usually in headphones, in your ear while you're doing the dishes or whatever. And I think a lot of the questions we get in, Rory and Alastair do a question time every week. Katty and Anthony do it most weeks. People feel like they really know them, and it's really nice. And they usually go like, it means that you get really insightful questions where you go like, oh, Anthony, like I know what your take on this is going to be. I want to ask Katty the same question. And it's quite nice, I think, the way they have such a casual relationship with one another. You, as a listener, are brought in to feeling like you're part of that relationship, and something that we really want to nurture as well by doing Q&As where you talk to people. We have a newsletter now that Katty and Anthony input to, and Alastair and Rory input to, where they can talk to our readers, I guess, rather than listeners. And then the other thing we do is now we do a lot of live shows, which is so nice. So you can have a complete direct interaction with the audience. And it's nice because you feel like it's a community, and you get, when I've gone around the crowd before they've all gone in and chatted to people who are coming in, they all go like, oh, I bet Rory's going to have something to say on this today. And they really feel like they know him, and it's really nice. And you see people talking to each other as well that are all part of this kind of nerdy podcast fandom, and seeing everyone in the crowd is like, it's really nice. And it's always interesting to see people in person and see who's listening, and have that live interaction where people can ask a question and have it answered immediately, and see the crowd reaction to it as well. Is always funny when, I don't know, the oohs and ahs of a reaction a question might get.
Yeah, it's a total game changer, the live event in front of an audience, because if you're a radio journalist or a text journalist or whatever, you're throwing stuff out there. It's a bit like an author writing a book, doesn't know what the reaction is unless they see someone on the tube reading it and chuckling to themselves. But an author can have a book reading or a signing event or something, and podcasters can do this. It must be a lovely thing. And also, I was doing an event recently, a kind of a Q&A about podcasts, where someone said, isn't there a danger if everyone's got parasocial, so meaning not really social relations? I don't really know Rory Stewart, but he talks to me, every week. Isn't it part of this atomization of society? Someone else in that audience where I was speaking said, yeah, but you do these live events, and actually that's a genuine social relationship, and people can talk between each other. They actually meet each other at events like that.
Yeah,
so tell me,
definitely.
I mean, what's it like? I've never done one. I've never been to one. What kind of event? Where was it? What did it feel like?
I know. Well, next time you're in the UK, we should definitely have you along to one, because they're really fun. I think it's quite a different tone maybe to the normal podcast. That it's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit less serious maybe. We always try and do a more serious or news-based first half, and I think all of our hosts are complete naturals on stage, and they're great at talking to the audience. Alastair in particular loves to do an audience poll, so that's Alastair kind of looking at the audience going, hands up, who wants to have a second Brexit referendum or whatever it is. And it's fun, and then you look around the crowd and you see what everyone else is thinking.
I bet they all feel they have to put their hands up. They're all the centrist dads.
I think there's a lot of pressure put on by Alastair for that question. There's definitely a right answer.
Yeah. and where'd you do it?
Yeah.
Where's the venue?
So we've done a few. I just got back a couple of weeks ago from being in Belfast and Dublin. And then we're actually putting on a Goalhanger festival for the first time ever at the South Bank Centre this September. So that's going to be all of the podcasts, I think, and lots of different size venues, some as small as like 200 seats, some in the thousands, matching the hosts as well. I think Anthony's doing one with the Rest is Classified guys. So that'll be really interesting to see what that looks like as a spectacle, I think.
Yeah, I've seen that promoted.
Before.
Richard Osman said on the Rest is Entertainment he's planning some kind of pub because he's a quiz master, isn't he? He presents he's going to quiz people on history and on politics and this kind of
stuff. I think the other thing our talent kind of all have in common is that they're all incredibly competitive with each other as well, in a fun way. So that'll be a really interesting ending, I think, to the festival. But no, they're really fun nights. I think people are always a bit surprised that they're not just the podcast but on stage. We put a big effort into producing them and making them something worthwhile for people who've spent their money on it. They've come, they've travelled, they've given up an evening of their time to see their podcast put on stage in a kind of interesting way. We always make sure we're doing fun features and polls and questions and playing videos and interacting. It's like, it's a really fun evening, and it's something we're still experimenting every time as well. We always try and bring a kind of different element to see what works and what doesn't.
Will Gary Lineker be there?
Yes. Let me check actually before I tell you. I think the Restless Football are doing one.
Can I just ask you a question about Gary Lineker? Because this is an incredible character in British culture who was one of the best ever footballers for England, one of the most successful presenters on BBC TV, and now this is his, I don't know if it's his company alone, he's got partners I think, but Goalhanger is kind of his company. It's just astonishing to me that a man should have had three massive careers like that.
It's amazing what he's created. So yeah, he and the Restless Football team will be doing a live show at the South Bank Centre as well. Gary set up the company with Tony Pastor, and it was originally like a sports documentary kind of company, and then Jack Davenport joined, I think, after they did We Have Ways of Making You Talk, and that's when we went much more into the podcast direction. And then, interestingly, Gary didn't do his own Restless Football podcast until a couple years in with Alan and Micah, which has obviously just been a huge success, and I hope the guys love doing. Yeah, he's had an amazing career, and I think this is a great point he's at now. It'll be fun to see them all on stage in September.
I'm getting towards the end of this, but I wanted to ask you, what's your dream guest or your dream episode or your dream podcast?
My dream guest? So we don't normally do guests on the Rest of Politics US, which is why it's quite a good... I think that is something that would be really fun to do more of. I wonder, maybe something that could be fun to do would be like having a look towards the future of the left and getting someone like AOC or Bernie Sanders, or getting them together to do a kind of what is the future of the Democrats and what's the left. Or maybe we do another episode with like some kind of more right-wing figures, like, I don't know, get Steve Bannon on or something for an alternate episode. I think that could be quite a fun thing to do.
Okay. I'd listen to those.
Would you listen to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I mean, very often, I think of Steve Bannon, I'm sure he's on loads of podcasts all the time, but there'll be ones where they'll be telling him how great he is. It would be quite nice to hear someone like that really challenged. I bet he'd be up for it as well. I think he's someone who puts himself out there, whether you like him or not. And what do you listen to then, Fiona? What podcasts do you listen to?
Yes, so I think the podcast that probably got me into podcasts in the first place is The Guardian's Today in Focus. So it's daily. It's usually like one topic that they discuss, and it's sometimes a really newsy thing, or it's sometimes an investigative thing, which is why I always it's always something a bit different that I really love listening to. And it's quite kind of a story simply explained. They spend like a good half an hour on one story, so it goes in depth, and it's my nice morning listening when I'm not listening to the Restless Politics.
What about kind of documentary style podcasts? Do you listen to any? Are you a true crime fan or investigative journalism?
Yeah, I never got into the true crime hype, actually, which I think it's such a thing that like young women in particular get into. I've listened to a few really good. The Tortoise series are always really good. Like, I think Sweet Bobby was one of their really big ones. That's
been on Pick of the Pods. Yeah, that was an early recommendation. Yes. Absolute classic. Right. And they made it into a Netflix TV documentary.
I'll have to watch that as well.
Yeah, here it is. 2024 film, Sweet Bobby, My Catfish Nightmare. It's really, really good. But if you've listened to the, and this is what I wrote in the Pick of the Pods newsletter on this episode, on this series, the way they tell it is beautifully done. I think why it's really it's really worth going back and listening to is, it's a bit like you said, Fiona, when you were scripting your series about Elon Musk. Oh, we don't want to give it all away in episode 1. There's a bit of a cliffhanger. There's a reveal.
They do that so well, don't they?
And that's done so well in Sweet Bobby. And people should listen to that without knowing anything about it. Just go in absolutely fresh if you can. And I thought there's no way they could do this on a movie, because you can't hold it in suspense like that, because if it's just purely audio, you can hide a lot of stuff.
What's going on,
and a lot of the catfishing thing is, these are messages, it's audio, you're not seeing the other person. Are they who they are pretending to be? Spoiler alert, probably not in this case. It's called My Catfish Nightmare. It's a bit on the nose, right? We know what it's about in the Netflix version. But the way they do it for Netflix actually is brilliant as well. But it totally shows you the difference in medium between a narrative documentary podcast and a documentary film. They're both really, really good. But what you can't do usually, I think, is cut and paste a podcast onto a movie. It's a very, very different medium. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that one. Are you looking forward to, are there particular things happening in the year ahead? There must be news events going on. I guess you've got the midterm elections.
Yeah, we've got the midterms coming up. I think we're hoping to do a few live shows around that. We're still talking about exactly how we're going to cover it. Obviously, before the election last year, we went daily pretty much before. I don't know if we'll do the same thing again, but I think that's definitely a big moment we're looking towards this year.
Great. Fiona, remind us, where can people find your podcast?
Yeah, just search The Rest is Politics US or The Rest is Politics wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube, we're on Apple, Spotify, all your usual platforms. Just search.
Fiona Douglas from The Rest is Politics US, mostly. Thanks for joining us on Pick of the Pods.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pick of the Pods is available every week, the newsletter. If you want one recommendation for a great podcast to listen to this week, search for Pick of the Pods on Substack. And Pick of the Pods, the podcast, you've just heard it. We'll be doing lots more of these. It won't be weekly, it's going to be monthly or so, listening to people like Fiona who are making those brilliant podcasts that we all enjoy. So find me at Pick of the Pods on Substack. Listen or watch Pick of the Pods, the podcast, wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.